Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's business studies lesson. My name is Tsidi Sotlaka. This program is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Sci-Bono Discovery Center. Today we look into the main topic we call the business environment and business operation, because now we start with our revision for paper 1. Now, learning outcomes. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to know the structure of the paper. You should also know the main topics that will be assessed, and the focus will be on business environment because we'll be looking into two legislations, which is your Skills Development Act and the Labor Relations Act. Remember, it's a revision, and remember that paper 1 has aspects of your term 1. Now, structure of the paper, which is the first part of our lesson. The structure of our paper is now having 3 sections. We have section A, B, and C. Now let's see what is contained in section A. In section A for your paper 1, you have compulsory short questions, which are now allocated 30 marks, and you have your business environments for 15 marks and business operations for 15 marks. And the types of questions you get there: 1.1 will be your multiple choice for 10 marks and choose the correct word, which is 1.2, 10 marks as well, and matching items would be 1.3 for 10 marks as well, and the total mark there would be 30, and time for the section would be 20 minutes. Then section B, in your paper 1, you have an instruction. You choose any 2 questions in your section B, and each question is allocated 40 marks, and then you'll be having question 2, 3, and 4. So basically you have 3 questions in your section B, and you have to choose 2 so that your mark allocation can get to 80, and the time you spend for that section is 70 minutes. So question 2 will look into business environment, meaning question 2 will be having your sectors and their environments, will be having legislation. Remember, we have 8 legislations, and we'll also we'll be having business strategy in your question 2. And the mark allocation there will be 40 marks. And then question 3, you'll be having business operation, which is likely to be the easiest to choose, because with your business operations, you only have 2 subtopics under that main topic, which is your quality of performance and human resources. And then you have 40 mark as well. And then with question 4 now, you have miscellaneous, and the total as well is 40 marks. And then miscellaneous basically is a combination of both your business environments and business operations, with the mark allocation being 20 marks for the business environment and 20 marks for the business operation, which now would make 40. So you can choose either question 2 and 3, or you can choose question 3 and 4, or question 2 and 4. It depends with what you are prepared for. And remember, before you can start answering your questions, it's important that you look into your section B thoroughly during your 15 minutes of reading time. You also look into the possibility of maybe obtaining 40 out of 40 in each section B question before you can choose a question. So do that, and before you can start now saying you are writing or choosing a question, look into how prepared you are for that question. Then section C, you have an essay type question there, and you have to choose 1 question, and you have 2 questions. You have question 5 and 6. Then question 5 is now an essay question from the business environment, which would be allocated now 40 marks. And then question 6 is a business operation essay type question for 40 marks as well. And then the time there to spend in this section is 30 minutes. And that makes the structure of your paper. And remember that when we are talking about question 5, the possibilities of an essay question there, it can either be legislation or business strategies. And when looking into question 6, the possibility of an essay question there can either be human resource or quality of performance. So it makes it easy for you to prepare for paper 1, because you know that you have only 2 subtopics here, 2 subtopics here, 2 subtopics. So you basically can choose to say, if you want to write an essay in business environment, you should know that you prepare legislation and you also prepare business strategies. But if you decide to now choose an essay type question in your question 6, and under the business operation, you know that you should prepare thoroughly in your human resources and in your quality of performance. These two would be potential essays for your prelim and for the final as well. Now, main topics, we have two, remember, we have the business environment and business operations. That is for paper 1. Now, business environment, will be our focus. We'll start with legislation, and we'll also look into business sectors and their environments, and together with business strategy. So the focus for our lesson will be legislation, and we will be looking into the following. To say, remember, we have the following legislations. We have Skills Development Act, we have Labor Relations Act, together with Employment Equity, and we also have Basic Conditions of Employment Act, together with Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, and your Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, together with National Credit Act and Consumer Protection Act. The focus of our lesson will be looking into the skills development together with the labor relation. We'll have section B questions on the skills development and on the labor relation, and we will also address an essay type question for the two legislations. And now let's start with our Skills Development Act as a revision to something you did back in term 1. Now, the main aim of the Skills Development Act, we should remember, with Skills Development Act, the main aim is for this act to improve the skill levels of people who are already employed in the business. So the skills development is an act that ensures now that the skills level of those who are already employed can improve, so that they contribute towards the productivity of the business or of the South African workforce as a whole. Because remember, an economy now has to be determined by its skill level, or by the employees. To say, if the employees of a particular country are skilled, it means the economy now will be in a better position to attract foreign investors as well. So those are some of the aspects that make it important for the government to come up with such acts to ensure that now the South African workforce can be skilled and contribute towards the productivity when it comes to producing or the production of goods and services. Now, the focus when you're looking into the legislations is the following, is to always look into the purpose of the Skills Development Act, and you should also look into the impact of an act to say what are the positives and negatives of implementing such an act for the business. You also look into discriminatory actions to say which actions are discriminatory that can be done by the business, and the business always should be careful to say they should avoid such discriminatory actions. And you look into ways in which as well a business can comply with the act, and look into penalties for non-compliance. Now, that is the focus for all the acts. You should know the purpose, and remember that the people who really developed the act was the government, to try and alleviate what used to happen in the apartheid system. So the aim was to improve the skills level of those who are already employed, because some of them didn't have now any formal education. So that's why the government had to develop now the Skills Development Act to ensure that they improve, remember, the skills of those who are already employed. So we'll also look into roles of setters, and also look into funding of setters, together with the meaning of learnership, to say what is a learnership, and also look into the meaning of national skills development strategy, and the meaning of human resource development strategy. So that would be the focus for our lesson. Now, the purpose, when we're talking about the purpose, we're saying, why was it developed? Why did the government want to implement the Skills Development Act? Why was it necessary? Why did they have to come up with this policy or this act? So the reason behind was that now the government wanted businesses to develop the skills of people in South Africa in order to improve the productivity. What do we mean by the word productivity? Productivity is an ability to use less raw material to produce more output or to produce more goods. So if employees are able now to ensure that they do not waste and they use less raw material to produce more goods and services, we consider that to be productivity. So if now employees are able to do that, it means they will achieve the state of productivity, which can attract foreign direct investment. And then as we proceed again, invest in education and training of workers. So the government was basically pushing businesses to invest in the education and training of workers. They also looked into improving chances of getting jobs for those who were previously disadvantaged people. So that is also another aim or purpose of the Act. And the Act also encourages workers to participate in learning programs and also redresses the imbalances of the past through education and training. Hence, now the government developed such an act, especially for people who are already employed. So that is the purpose of your Skills Development Act. Now, we are looking into discriminatory actions according to the Skills Development Act to say what can be considered to be discriminatory. So, which actions can be considered to be discriminatory if the business is to perform those. Now, if the business now prevents or the preventing of employees from signing for a learnership due to their age or position in the workplace is considered to be discriminating against that particular employee, especially because they are looking into their age or position. Because when some employees are holding critical positions or important positions, the business doesn't want to waste time with such employees because they know that they are very, very important, especially when looking into contributing to the production or productivity of the business. So sometimes such employees might be discriminated against having an opportunity to learn or sign for a learnership program. So that is discriminatory because everyone should be given an opportunity to improve their skills, no matter how important they are in the organization. And then unfair promotion of skills and development or training to certain employees is also considered to be a discriminatory action that can be done by the business to say when there's an opportunity to develop the skills of employees, everyone should be given an opportunity or platform to apply for or to try and improve their skills. And then another discriminatory action could be the idea that providing employment services for gain without being registered as an employer would be considered as well as discriminatory because it means employees will not be now allowed a room to improve their skills because the employer is not registered as a business that is offering employment services. And then furnishing false information in any prescribed document that would be used for the training of workers is also considered to be discriminatory because whatever information will not be beneficial to the employees who are participating in that learning program. So these are actions that are considered to be discriminatory. Now, ways businesses can comply with the Skills Development Act. How can businesses comply with the Skills Development Act? The employer who collects pay as you earn should register with SETAs. What do we mean by SETAs? These are sector education and training authorities. So basically, they act as the Department of Education, but this Department of Education is directly involved or controls the education and training that takes place in the workplace or in the working environment. Because we know that we have the Department of Education, which focuses on the primary, secondary school, and tertiary education. However, SETAs now focus on the education and training that takes place in the different working spaces or different working environments. So we call them sectors, hence we say sector education and training authorities. And when we are talking about sectors, we are talking about primary, secondary, and tertiary. So these sector education and training authorities would basically take care of the education that would take place in the primary sector, in the secondary sector, and in the tertiary sector. Hence we say they are authorities, meaning they have power on which education should take place in the primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. Furthermore, another way to comply now is to ensure that 1% of an employee's payroll has to be paid over to the sectors, which I thoroughly explained to say these are the authoritarians who decide on which education and what training should take place in the different sectors, primary, secondary, and tertiary businesses. And then they pay 1%. That is one way to comply as well. And another way to comply is that businesses should register with SARS. What do we mean by SARS there? We know what SARS is. It's the process now that businesses would use to pay their tax. So businesses should register with SARS in the areas in which their business is classified in terms of sectors. So when we're talking about areas in which businesses is classified, we are talking about the sector at which the business is classified under. So if the business is in the tertiary, it means they have to be registered with SARS under the tertiary sector. If they are now in manufacturing, they have to be registered in the secondary sector under SARS. And when we are looking into registering as well in the primary sector. So that's why they say businesses should register with SARS in the area in which the business is classified when looking into the three sectors, primary, secondary, and tertiary, in terms of their sector. Then, employers should submit a workplace skills plan and provide evidence that it was implemented. Now, another way to comply with this act, remember this act wants to see employees improving their skills in the workplace. And remember, the focus is largely on people or employees already employed by the organization. So the business now, to comply, they need to develop what we call a workplace skills plan. So this is basically a plan on which skills they would want to improve for their workers. And they should also provide evidence that it was implemented within the organization, meaning it was done, it was performed, employees were trained on those particular skills that were needed or that were submitted in the workplace skills plan. And then businesses with more than 50 employees must must appoint a skills development facilitator. Now, a skills development facilitator is basically a facilitator will be checking if the education and training that is taking place within the organization to say, is it effective? Is it the right type of education? Are the right objectives taking place? And are the correct skills being implemented or trained to the workers? So the skills development facilitators basically play a role of monitoring or checking if the education and training that is taking place in the learnerships or in the programs created by the business are effective and are on point with the workplace skills plan. Then that is a way in which a business could follow now laws or rules to comply with the Skills Development Act. Now, penalties if the business does not comply. Now, what are the penalties for a business that does not comply? What do we mean by a business that does not comply? A business that does not comply is a business that is basically not making sure that their employees are getting training and education in the workplace. So the business that does not comply could suffer penalties. Penalties should be considered to be punishment for not following the rules or compliance we just talked about. So businesses that do not pay the skills development levy, which is the 1% of the payroll, may not offer learnerships or claim grants from the Skills Development Act. Another one is that a labor inspector could order the business to stop operating should the business be found of guilty or guilt of illegal practices. So those would be penalties for non-compliance, which would also tarnish the image of the organization. Because remember that one of the critical ways to comply with the skills development is to pay 1% of the payroll of the employees. So that 1% will later be claimed so that the business will be able to train their workers. So basically, you pay 1% each and every month or annually, looking into how much you pay as a salary bill. Thereafter, when now the business wants to train workers, they go to the Skills Development Act and say they want to claim from the grant that the Skills Development Act would be having for that particular business. Now, the impact of implementing this act. Remember, when we are looking into the impact, we need to understand the act and what it does. Then we look into positives and negatives to say what are the positives of implementing skills development and what are the negatives for implementing skills development for the business. We need to be clear. These are positives for implementing the skills development. We are looking into how the business is going to benefit. And remember, in the process of the business benefiting, because we are talking about skills, the employees will also benefit. So somewhere, somehow, it would benefit both the business and the employees. But some of the positives is that it trains employees to improve productivity in the workplace. So immediately the employees become now very competent or become very skilled. It means the productivity of the business, remember, of the business now increases. So the productivity will improve. Hence, we say now it trains employees so that they become skilled, and immediately employees are now skilled. It means they have the skill, they have the knowledge on how to do the processes very fast. And then when that happens, it means productivity now is being achieved. And remember, I said productivity is an ability to use less raw material to produce more goods and services. So that is now productivity. So that would help the business now to achieve the state of productivity because their employees are skilled or have more knowledge now due to the training that took place. Because remember, new skills are forever there because of the changes in technology. So somehow employees need to be trained so that they have the relevant skills to ensure that customers would be satisfied and the business would be able to achieve their state of productivity. So the benefit now or the positive for the employees who are trained is that the business productivity will increase. Then another one is that now it promotes self-employment and black entrepreneurship. Remember, this is an act developed by the government. So as I said, it will not only benefit the government, but the positives will also benefit the employees. To say now it promotes self-employment and black entrepreneurship. Now employees can be their own bosses and they can also start their own businesses. So it becomes a benefit or a positive to the employees. Now, the workplace is used as an active learning environment where employees can get or gain practical job experiences. That also encourages employees and is a positive because the workplace now is being used to train or improve the skills. And later on, it also goes back to the issue of productivity. However, what are the negatives? The negatives now, remember, when you're talking about negatives, you're talking about aspects that affect the business negatively or aspects now that do not make the business to make more profit or aspects that waste the time of the business. So when you're looking into the issue of the skills development levy, which is now a contribution or money that has to be paid towards the Skills Development Act. Remember, I said that is 1%. So that 1% now could be an extra burden to a financially struggling business because now they have to pay the 1% and they have to try and balance their operations as well. And then it also increases the cost as the process requires a large amount of what now paperwork and someone to work with that particular paperwork that now the business might still have to pay that individual. And then implementation of the Skills Development Act can be difficult to monitor and control because in the process of monitoring and controlling that, it means now the business is losing an important resource, which is time. So those can be now the negatives of implementing skills development. Now, we further look into other aspects. Remember that we have 8 legislations, and some of the legislations have other parts or extra parts that are not focused on the purpose, the impact, the compliance, the non-compliance, and the penalty. So we have rules of sectors. Remember, we talked about sectors to say what are sectors? Sectors refers to now sector education and training authorities. Sector, we are looking into primary, we are looking into secondary, and tertiary businesses. So basically, when we are saying role of sectors, we are saying role of sector education and training authorities. So basically, the sectors, we are referring to the training or the education that will be taking place within the primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. So these are the authorities who would be now looking, monitoring, controlling, and also approving which skills are needed, considering the changes in technology and the changes in the markets or the changes in the business operations. So the authorities will basically be individuals controlling the level of knowledge that should be taking place, or the level of education and training that should be taking place in primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. Remember, the primary sector is a sector that now extracts raw material from nature, and the secondary sector is a sector that is now converting raw material into finished or semi-finished goods. And when we're looking into the tertiary sector, we're talking about a sector that offers services to the final users of the product. So those now sectors have to be looked into, and education and training authorities would decide which skill is needed for those particular sectors. Now, the role of the sector education and training authorities: one is to report to their director general, so they have to report to their director general. Another one is to promote and establish learnerships for the different sectors, to say which learnership can be now developed and be offered to the workers so that they train their skills or improve their skills. And another role of sectors is to collect levies. Remember, we talked about the 1% that is being paid by the businesses or the employers. So they have to collect the levies and pay out grants as required. So they collect levies, and then when the business now needs to train their employees, the business now would go to the sectors as well, and or the sector education and training authorities, and say, now we are looking for the grant, we want to train our workers, and then they would allocate the grant to that particular business. And then they also provide accreditation for the skills development facilitators, so meaning they approve who should be a facilitator for which sector, and then they also give outline or responsibilities to these facilitators to say what are they going to monitor when they go to businesses that are engaging in learnerships. And then they further register learnership agreements and learning programs for businesses, and also approve workplace skills plan. Remember, the business complies by submitting a workplace skills plan. And then what now the education and sector authorities does is to approve, to say this workplace skills plan is relevant to the needs of that particular sector. And then they also ensure that they approve annual training reports, to say after a business has trained their workers for a year, then the sectors will be the ones who approve the training reports. So hence we say now you see 3 individuals there who are in charge for the 3 sectors. The other one might be for primary, the other one for secondary, and the other one for tertiary. So they report to their director general, who's their boss. They promote and establish learnerships. They collect levies from the businesses and also pay out grants for businesses that want to train their workers. And they provide accreditation for skills development facilitators and register learnership agreements and learning programs. Those are the roles of sector education and training authorities. Now, let's see how they are funded. How do they receive the income to operate their office? So they would receive money in this way: skills development levies. Remember, businesses, again, this is very, very important, hence I say it's critical. Businesses pay 1% of their payroll, of their payroll. So Since businesses pay now that 1% is considered to be a skills development levy paid by the employer, and then that skills development levy would be divided by the setters. In this way, for an example, 80% is distributed to the different sectors, and then when you are looking into the 20% is paid to the National Skills Fund, which would be bursaries and NSFAS programs to ensure that training actually takes place. And then donations and grants from the public is also another way in which sectors are funded, and another way is the surplus funds from the government institutions, and another way is funds received from services rendered by sectors. So this is a way in which the Office of the Sector Education and Training Authority is funded. Then we look into the meaning of learnership to say, what do we mean by a learnership? Now, a learnership is a theoretical or a practical training opportunity that can lead to a recognized occupational qualification. And then this is also a structural learning program completed during work hours for a specified period of time. And then it's also an agreement between a learner or a trainee or an employer and a training provider. And then it may include employment for a specified period of time after the learnership is completed. That's what we mean with a learnership. Then the meaning of national skills development strategy. What do we mean there? This is a skills development strategy, national. What do we mean by national? The South African plan to improve the strategy of skills development in South Africa. Now it improves. How can South Africa improve the skills levels in South Africa? One, by increasing access to programs that train people. So when we're talking about access, we're talking about location. Ensure that people can find different locations where they can improve their skills. Ensure that there's colleges. Ensure that there are schools. Ensure that there are universities to cater for different skills. Ensure that people who want to be builders can have access to learning about the building process, and then ensure that people who want to do carpentry can learn about that. Hence, we say increase access to programs that train people in different skills. That's one. And then another one, promote the public FET college system that has programs to meet the needs needed by the sectors, local, regional, provincial, and national government organizations. So when we're talking about local, regional, remember local, we have municipalities would need plumbers, would need electricians. So improve access to those and ensure that the public FET college system offers those skills. And then another one, address the low level of language and mathematical skills amongst the youth and adults. So hence I say now this is national, and when we are saying national, we are saying South African, we are saying the RSA, Republic of South African government, ways in which they can improve the skills in South Africa and then make better use of the workplace-based skills development. And that is one way. And then the meaning now of the human resource development strategy. This one is focused now in the business to say now it addresses the skills shortages in the South African workforce. And then another one now, the aim is at achieving a faster economic growth or higher employment levels and reduced levels of poverty. And then another one is to promote social development or social justice and help to alleviate poverty. And then it's also to develop short-term or long-term workplace or workforce skills. Then let us see, we have now a typical exam question. We had an instruction there to say let's just complete that typical exam question, and then the instruction was 2.1, read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have low solar maintenance, LSM. The management of low now solar maintenance follows rules because as they have now registered with the setters. And then low solar maintenance also submits the workplace skills plan, and they ensure that employees are paid equally for the work of equal value. Now, quote two ways in which now Lolo solar maintenance complies with the Skills Development Act from the scenario above. Now, you have 2 marks for that, and 2.1.2 discuss the impact of the Skills Development Act on low solar maintenance as a business, and 2.1.3 explain the role of sectors in supporting the Skills Development Act. What is critical there is to read the scenario and understand. The management of low solar maintenance follows rules as they have been registered with the setters. Now, one way to comply, remember, is to register with setters. That is one way to comply. And then another way, they also submit workplace skills plan. That is another way to comply. But when we look into the last sentence now, they ensure that employees are paid equally for work of equal value. Is that now part and parcel of skills development? Does it talk about improving the skills? No, I don't think so. So the last sentence now cannot be considered to be a way in which now the business complies with the skills development. So when we look into our solutions, the meaning now, the first part, the management of now low solar maintenance, that is correct, and also submitting workplace skills plan, that is correct as well, and you get 2 marks for those quotations. And now we move to the other question. The other question now, the positives and negatives of Skills Development Act. It trains employees to improve productivity. Training employees, 1 mark for that, and improving productivity in the workplace, another mark for that. Remember, when we are discussing and evaluating the impact, we want the cause and effect to say now the cost that the business is training their employees has a positive effect of the business increasing or improving their productivity, cause and effect. And then another one, it promotes self-employment and black entrepreneurship, that is cause and effect over there. And then the workplace is used as an active learning environment, that is one, where employees can gain practical job experience, that is another one. So the sentences now have to support each other to say, since the workplace is being used as a workplace, as an active learning environment, they also gain practical job experience. That becomes 2, and then we have 6 marks there. And then looking into negatives or disadvantages, it increases the cost as the process, it increases the cost becomes 1, as the process requires large amount of paperwork, is another one. And then the implementation of the Skills Development Act can be difficult to monitor and control. So those are your cause and effect to say they need to support each other. To say, why are you saying it's a positive? You give a justification in a way. So that is how you get your total of 8. And we split marks. Remember what tells you that you should split marks on or give the cause and effect is the verb discuss. Immediately the question says discuss, evaluate, analyze, justify the effectiveness of the Skills Development Act on a business. You should know that you should give a cause and effect, or your sentences should support each other so that you would get your total mark allocated. Because if you are now to say the positive is that it trains employees, you'll just get 1 mark for that. Then avoid doing that. And then the role of setters now, when you're looking into the role of setters, the role of setters is that the setters have to report to the director general, and they also promote and establish learnerships, and they collect levies and pay out grants, and they also provide accreditation for skills development facilitators, and also register learnership agreements or learning programs, together with approving workplace skills plan and annual training reports. That is a total mark of 8 there. And when you're being marked, we'll consider the first 4. And if you don't get the 8 marks from the first 4, we also consider that because of now the verb and how the question is phrased. Because the question says explain the role of setters. But if the question was to now explain 4 rules, because the number of facts has been stated to say they want 4 rules, we will only mark the first 4. And then even if these 2 are correct, we will not consider, because the question has been phrased as explain the 4 rules. So keep that in mind when you are responding to your questions. Then we start with the labor relations. Why was this act introduced? Why was it developed by the government? This act was introduced to promote simple procedures for the resolution of labor disputes in the workplace. And whenever there's a dispute in the workplace, now you understand what we mean by dispute, because remember, we looked into team performance and conflict management, which was talking about labor disputes, to say what is a dispute and how do you deal with dispute and how do you deal with grievance. So when we're looking into labor relation, it is an act which was introduced to ensure there's a simple procedure for resolution of labor disputes. A dispute now is a labor dispute is a disagreement between the employer and the employee in the workplace caused by the employment conditions or the working environment conditions. Now, the focus when you're looking into labor relation becomes the idea of the purpose of labor relation, the impact as well. We also look into discriminatory actions and look into compliance, and also look into penalties for non-compliance, together with employers' rights and employees' rights. That is the focus when you are studying now your labor relation. You look into the purpose, you look into the impact, together with discriminatory, compliance, non-compliance, and also look into employers' rights and employees' rights. And remember that the mark allocation now in your section B is always 6 to 4 marks in your section B. But when you're looking into an essay question, you can prepare for 5 points, which is an allocation of 10 marks. So always keep that in mind when you're studying. Then the purpose, why do we have now labor relations? Remember, labor, it has to do with workers doing their work. However, relation is now the employees or the workers' relationship with the employer has to be facilitated in a way that now the employers do not violate the employees. So one, where labor relation was established by the government for this purpose, to promote collective bargaining at the workplace. What do we mean by collective bargaining? With collective bargaining, we are talking about employees and their trade unions with employers and their employers associations or organizations who would come together and they collectively agree on working conditions or disputes or ways in which the dispute can be solved. So hence now we see collective bargaining to say now it is promoted by Labor Relations Act, because the act now focuses on having a peaceful relationship between the employer and the employee. It also establishes labor courts and labor appeal courts, so that if a matter was not solved within the organization, it can be taken to external courts which will try to solve the matter looking into labor law. And then it promotes fair labor practices between the employer and the employee. So this promotes now fair labor practices. And remember, it does not only promote or protect the employee, it also protects the employer, to say what are the labor practices, what is an arrangement between the employer and the employee, and how should they treat each other, because they have a relationship. Hence we say labor relations. And then furthermore, we have now another aspect that says it promotes workplace forums to accommodate employees in the decision making. So workplace forum basically would be a group of employees who are elected voluntarily to ensure now that they facilitate the communication process between the employees and the employer, especially in a large organization, so that the communication can be clear and so that employees can participate in the decision making processes. Because you are still in school now, this would be similar to your class representatives, because they contribute towards the decision making that is taking place for the class and for the school. So that's what we mean with workplace forums. And then it provides for the right to lock out by the employer as reaction to lengthy strike, to say now employers can now have a right to lock out. Then it promotes simple procedures for the registration of trade unions and employers organization. That as well is being facilitated. Now that is what we mean with the purpose of Labor Relations Act. Now we look into the discriminatory actions according to the Labor Relations Act. One of them is unfair or illegal dismissal of employees. The business now has to know which aspects are considered to be discriminatory. They should know what is the process when it comes to making sure that they dismiss an employee. Hence, now, if now a business does unfair or illegal dismissal of employees, that would be considered according to the labor relations as a discriminatory action. And then another one is preventing employees from joining trade unions is also considered to be discriminatory by the business, because employees have to have a trade union which would represent them. And then another one is refusing the establishment of workplace forums is also considered to be part and parcel of a discriminatory action by the business, because an organization needs to have a workplace forum, and that forum of employees would basically facilitate the communication process within the management together with the employees. And enforcing employees to give up their trade union membership would also be considered to be discriminatory by the business, because the act talks about making sure that there is proper communication between the employer and the employee. And then if there's one who now has a problem and they're failing to communicate, they should now consult with external parties such as the trade union. Hence, now when we are looking into the issue of discriminatory action, is to say if you are forcing employees to give up their trade unions, you are basically saying to them they should not have a representative in a case of any dismissal issue or any dispute issue that may occur. And then not allowing employees to take part in legal strikes is also considered to be discriminatory, because employees have their economic right to participate in a legal strike. And then those are actions that are now considered to be discriminatory. And then punishment for a business that is now discriminating, because when you're looking into your legislations, you should look into the purpose, then look into discriminatory, and then to say now if one is discriminating, what can be the penalties, because those discriminatory actions basically means the business is not complying. Now, the employer may be forced to enter into a dispute resolution process. That's one penalty. Another one is that the business will be fined if they fail to comply with the agreements reached during the dispute resolution process. And then another one is that businesses that fail to comply with this act may risk financial costs, such as now the legal fees or the CCMA fees or fines. Those can be penalties now for businesses that do not comply, for businesses that do unfair or illegal dismissals. So those are penalties. These are basically punishments for businesses that would basically do the discriminatory actions we just talked about, not allowing employees to participate in a legal strike, not now allowing employees to have trade unions. Those are now discriminatory actions, and they are basically considered to be non-compliance, because when you are doing that, you can have penalties for performing such actions. And then when we look now into ways to comply with the Labor Relations Act, one, and when you're looking into ways to businesses can comply now, you need to compare them with your discriminatory, because the discriminatory now actions according to the Labor Relations Act started with what? Unfair dismissal of employees is discriminatory. But a way in which a business can comply is to say now employees should not be unfairly dismissed. If they are dismissed, they should have cases, they should be an evidence that they repeated the same action and warnings were issued. So that is one way to comply. Another way is that allow the establishment of workplace forums. And then, as we said in discriminatory actions, is that businesses that now do not allow discriminatory actions, they're basically discriminating and they are not complying. So a way to comply is that they should allow establishment of workplace forums. And then those would be individuals who facilitate the communication process between the management and employees of the business. And then employers should not ignore any collective agreement that was now agreed to when there was trade unions, employees together with now the employer and the employer's organization. They should not ignore that. That would be their way of complying. And then the business must allow employees to form now trade union so that they can be represented by their particular union. Now, looking into the impact, what are the positives there? The positives for the business is that it protects the rights of businesses in labor-related issues. And then another one is that now labor disputes are settled quicker and they become less expensive because now there are processes that allow communication to be facilitated, like the workplace forum, like trade unions would be there, and a matter in this case is likely to end internally. Meaning, if there's a dispute, it can be solved internally without the need of any legal fees or CCMA organizations coming in to solve the matter. So, labor disputes get to be solved quicker and they are less expensive. And then the workplace forum can add value to the business if it functions properly. And then looking into the negatives, as I said, these are positives. Remember, less expensive and it saves time. Then we also look into negatives now to say, when we are looking into negatives, it reduces now global competitiveness due to lower productivity. Labor relation now, it means it protects the employees because employees have the right to strike, have the right to complain, lodge a grievance, and so forth. So it means the productivity of South Africa now gets to be affected because of the laws that protect the employees in the country. So it means now productivity will be lower, and that can lead to now South Africa not attracting the foreign direct investment, and then productivity may decrease if employees are allowed to participate in the activities of trade unions during work time. So the productivity will reduce because some employees would be participating in their trade union activities, which they are allowed to do so, and there's rights that govern to say they have a right to participate, but the productivity of the business is affected and cost of labor increases because of the legal strikes. And then we have now the rights of employers and employees according to the Labor Relations Act. Now, looking into the first aspect, which is the rights of now employers. What are the rights of employers? They have the right to form an employers organization which will represent the employer's needs. And then they have a right to form a bargaining council for a collective bargaining what? Purpose. A bargaining council is the individuals who will be there, which is your trade unions and your employers association, together with the employer and the employee, so that they can achieve a collective bargaining whereby they discuss matters that are affecting employees and matters that are affecting employers as well. And then they also have a right as employers. Now, they have a right to lock out employees who engage in illegal strikes. So, employees who are engaging in illegal strikes have the right to be locked out of the business because they might be violent and they might now try to damage the property of the business. And then they also have a right now to dismiss employees who are engaged in unprotected strike or misconduct, such as intimidation or violence during the strike action. So, when we're talking about unprotected, we are talking about an illegal strike that is not approved by the court. And then they also have the right not to pay employees who now has taken part in a protected strike for services or work they did not do during the strike. So that is also part and parcel of your right of employees. Then that is the rights of employers. Then when you're looking into rights of employees, employees may join a trade union of their choice. That is one, they have a right to do so. They have a right to embark on a legal strike as a remedy for grievance, meaning a working condition that is not making the employees happy. And then they have a right to refer an unsolved workplace dispute to the CCMA. And then another one, they have a right to ensure that unresolved CCMA disputes are referred to now the CCMA or to the Labor Court on appeal. So they have a right to refer unsolved CCMA disputes to the Labor Court. So if the CCMA failed to solve a dispute, that dispute can be taken to the now Labor Court. Then They have a right to request the trade union representatives to assist or represent employees in the grievance or disciplinary hearing, and then those would be the rights of employees. Now let us look into another typical exam question. 2.2. Now you read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have the scenario there, 2.2.1 and 2.2.2. Then you have 2.2.3. Now that is your scenario over there. The instruction is 2.2. Read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have Libusa Wholesalers. Libusa Wholesalers sells grocery items in Tembisa, and they employ 50 workers who are allowed to join a trade union of their choice. And the management of Libusa Wholesalers resolved work-related disputes through statutory counsel, mediation, and arbitration. Now, 2.2.1, identify the act that applies to Libusa Wholesalers and quote from the scenario above to support your answer. That is for 3 marks. Then we have 2.2.2, discuss the impact of the act identified in question 2.2.1. Now, this is what we call a follow-on question, because if now you have identified, the wrong act in 2.2.1, it means basically you're going to give the incorrect as well impact, because you're going to give positives and negatives of an incorrect act, because the question now says discuss the impact of the act identified in question 2.2.1. And then when you look into 2.2.3, recommend the employer's rights according to the Labor Relations Act. Now, let's look into our scenario again. Libusa Wholesalers. Libusa Wholesalers sells grocery items in Tembisa. There's no answer there, obviously. And then they employ 50 workers who are allowed to join a trade union of their choice. Now, what is key there for you is the word trade union, because you should know that out of all the 8 acts, there's only one act that talks about trade unions. There's only one act that would talk about solving disputes. So the key words there should be the word dispute, the word trade union, and then when you're looking into your statutory conciliation and mediation together with arbitration, those are keywords, and they talk to only one act, and that act talks about the relationship between the employer and the employee, which is the labor relation. So what is key is to know the keywords for each and every act so that you're able to identify from the scenario. When you're talking about skills development, whenever you see upgrading skills, improving knowledge, because the assessor can use different phrases, but if they have to do with improving the skills, you should know that we are talking about skills development. And somewhere, somehow, you should also be smart, because remember, part and parcel of the broad-based Black economic empowerment talks about a pillar called skills development. So if the act is like identify a pillar, and then the scenario talks about what? The business that ensures that they improve their skills, you should know when they're saying identify the pillar that is applied by the broad-based Black, that the answer is no longer skills development act, but the answer is now skills development as a pillar of the broad-based Black economic empowerment. So the key words for each and every act, when you're talking about basic conditions of employment act, we know that the focus there should be on the idea that we are talking about the working conditions, we are talking about the working hours, we are talking about the leave conditions. You should know the focus and the key aspects or key terminology for each act, and you will be able to identify the correct act applicable to the scenario. And then the answer here was supposed to be labor relations, because now they employ 50 workers who are allowed to join a trade union of their choice. And another one is that they have now resolved work-related disputes through the statutory mediation and arbitration. Then you get 3 marks for that. And then we move to the follow on now, the impact of the act identified in 2.1.1. Remember, the act identified there is labor relations. So you should be knowing that if They are talking about the act identified in the, it was the Labor Relations Act. And then if it's the Labor Relations Act, you provide the impact of the Labor Relations Act, which is the positives and negatives. And remember, you are allowed to only provide positives only, or you are allowed to provide negatives only, or a combination of both. Now, labor relations protects the rights of businesses in the labor-related issues, and the labor disputes are settled quicker and they are less expensive, and the workplace forum can add value to the business if it functions properly. And the negatives, now they get that productivity decreases if employees are allowed to participate in activities of a trade union during work time, and it reduces now the global competitiveness due to lower productivity, and the cost of labor increases because of the legal strikes. And then you get now 8 months for that. And then looking into the rights of employers, is that they have the right to form an employers now association, and then they have a right to form a bargaining council for collective bargaining purposes, and employers have a right to lock out employees who engage in unprotected or illegal strike or labor action. And then another one is that they dismiss employees who are engaging in unprotected strike. You can end your sentence there, or you can choose a sentence or a structure the phrase as in, or they can who engage in misconduct such as intimidation or violence during the strike action. That's two as well. And then you have a right not to pay an employee who has taken part in a protected strike for services or work they did not do during the strike. Then you get 6 months for that. Now we look into those essays. How to write an essay is the first part. The critical part is to say how to write an essay. This now is a way you should write your essay. The essay should consist of the introduction, body, and conclusion. And another one is that now when you start your essay, your introduction now, the part of your introduction, how do you introduce there? The introduction should reflect any of the 4 subheadings in an essay and will be allocated with 2 marks for 2 responses, meaning you have to give 2 sentences and 1 mark for each one under the introduction. Thereafter, we have the what now, your 4 subheadings. You start with your 4 subheadings, which we automatically take as body. So you should not write the word body, because sometimes you will lose your marks because you have now provided the word body in the wrong part of your essay. Now, the point now says it is advisable that you do not write the word body in the essay to avoid forfeiting marks if your fact is one of the subheadings under the introduction, because you know the structure of your essay is to have an introduction over there, you have an intro, then you have the first subheading and the third subheading, and then the first subheading. Let's say that you have the first subheading over there, you underline, and then if you write the word body there, you're going to lose all the sentences or all the responses you made under your first subheading. But I'm going to show you in the next slide to say what do we mean by this. And then the body should consist of the 4 subheadings or sub questions on your essay. And remember, your sub questions are provided in your question paper. And then this is a way you conclude. You conclude your essay with new meaning or a fact that was not mentioned either in the introduction or in your body. So make sure now that in your conclusion, you do not repeat a sentence that you already wrote about in your introduction or during your body of your essay. Now, a total of 2 marks will be now allocated for one of the full sentence in the conclusion. So you provide only one full sentence and you get 2 marks for that. Now, as we proceed, your essay question is structured in this manner. This is a typical essay question. You have now your typical essay question, and the first part there is the preamble. The preamble is just statements providing you or provided to you about the act or about the question you're about to write. on. So the competencies of the workplace allows the business to function optimally, and the setters now help in guiding businesses on the most essential skills, and this helps businesses to function effectively and efficiently. Now, as a skills development expert, provide detailed report on the following aspects of the Skills Development Act. See, now that is for you to provide an essay on the following: roles of setters, and according to the Skills Development Act, discuss the purpose of the Skills Development Act, evaluate the impact of the Act on businesses, and recommend ways in which a business can comply for 40 marks. Then, solutions. This is how your essay should be structured. Remember, you were told on how to write an essay question. One, you should have an introduction with two responses under, so you provide one and one, then you get 2 marks for that. And then when we are looking into now the question again, you have the 4 sub questions from your essay question. Now that is where I come back with that piece of advice to say, do not write the word body, because if it happens that you respond now to this first subheading, remember this is considered to be your first subheading, which is to outline the role of setters. So let's say you outline your role of setters, and then after outlining you write the word body here. If you write the word body here, now you're going to lose marks, because your first subheading, which is to outline the role of setters, will be considered as an introduction. And then the first part of your body would be considered to be discuss the purpose of Skills Development Act. Hence, you are advised to say, do not write the word body. And again, do not write the word main part. Main part is for economics. We don't have the main part, we don't have the body. Just write your first subheading after your introduction. So keep that in mind. Do not write the word body, do not write the word main part. Main part is for economics, and body is no longer there for business studies, because you end up losing marks during the final exam. Please, grade 12, keep that in mind. And then another subheading is to evaluate the impact of the act, and another one is to recommend ways in which the business can comply with the act, and conclusion. Remember, here you provide only one sentence or response for your conclusion. Now, this is how you would practically go about doing your essay. You remember introduction should be having any aspect of the questions that were there in your or sub questions. So you have 4 sub questions, and your introduction should include that. So developing the skills of people in South Africa in order to improve productivity, that is 1 mark for that. And then when you move now, the first subheading is to outline the role of setters according to the Skills Development Act. The role of setters is to report to the Director General. Another one is to promote and establish learnership programs. Another one is to collect levies and pay out grants as required. And another one is to provide accreditation for skills development facilitators. And then you now look into discussing the purpose of Skills Development Act. What is the purpose? Is to invest in education and training of workers. Another one is to improve the chances of getting jobs for previously disadvantaged, and encourage workers to participate in learning programs. And another one is to redress imbalances of the past through education and training. And then you get 8 there, and you also get 8 there, and 1 mark there. And remember, if you provided the word introduction and attempted to write, you get an L to show that you have structured your essay properly. Then another one, evaluating the impact. Now, training employees to improve the productivity in the workplace and promote self-employment and black entrepreneurship. So training employees 1 promoting self-employment and black entrepreneurship. And then skills development levy could be an extra burden to a financially struggling business, and then it increases the cost as the process requires a lot of paper work. And then you get 8 marks for that. And then recommending ways now to comply is that the employer should collect pay as you earn, should register with the setters. And then another one, 1% of employers' payroll has to be paid to the setters. And another one is to ensure now that the employer should submit a workplace skills plan and provide evidence for the idea that it was implemented. And then the conclusion, the employer should submit a workplace skills plan and provide evidence that it was implemented. Now, this is not a new meaning, because you can see the last subheading and you can see the conclusion. These are similar. So you will not be marked wrong, but this will be considered to be repetition. So avoid doing such mistakes. Make sure that a new meaning is provided in the conclusion. So you were supposed to provide maybe a sentence that you did not provide either in your introduction or in your conclusion. Now we also have another typical essay question, which is your labor relations. Now preamble again. This is the statement about an essay you're about to write. The relationship between the employer and the employee is guided by the Labor Relations Act of 1995, Act 66. Businesses who do not comply with this act may face penalties. As a labor relations expert, provide a detailed report on the following aspects of the Labor Relations Act. Outline the rights of the employer and employees according to the labor relations, discuss the purpose, evaluate the impact, and recommend ways in which a business can deal with the Labor Relations Act. What are the solutions? Introduction there. This is how you go about. This is how it should be structured without the actual responses, but this is I'm trying to paint a picture here to say this is how it should be structured. Now we provide the solutions. The act promotes employment equity and democracy in the workplace through prevention of unfair labor practices. And then as we proceed, the labor relations deals with hiring, disciplining, firing employees, or trade unions negotiating and strikes. Then another one in outlining now the rights of employers. We'll start with the employer. What are the rights there? The employer who have a right to lock out employees who engage in unprotected or illegal strike or labor action. They have a right to form an employers organization. They have a right to form a bargaining council for collective bargaining purpose. Then as we proceed, employees now rights. Employees have a right to form a trade union of their choice, and they also have a right to request trade union representatives to assist or represent employees' grievance or disciplinary hearing. And then another one is trade union representatives have to take reasonable time off work with pay to attend their trade union duties. Then purpose of LRA to provide structure for labor now relations and employees or trade unions. It is also to promote or facilitate the bargaining process or collective bargaining in the workplace, and to promote workplace forums to accommodate employees' decision-making process. And another one is to provide for the right to lock out by the employer as reaction to a lengthy strike. So remember, here we have 6 and the other sentence at 6 as well. So we have 12, and then here 2, 4, 6, 8 as well. Then 0, 8 there. Then evaluating the impact, it protects the rights of the business when it comes to the labor related issues. Another one is that labor disputes are settled quicker and they become less expensive, and it reduces global competitiveness due to lower productivity. Those are negatives, and the cost of labor increases because of legal strikes. Then get your 8 there. Then recommending ways in which a business can comply. Employees should not be unfairly dismissed, 2 marks. And then allow the establishment of workplace forums, and employers should not ignore any collective agreement. Then the conclusion should be a new meaning. LRA provides for conflict resolution mechanisms in the workplace. Then that is 2 marks. Then you have 16 for that, and 12 the other one, and then the maximum becomes 32 max. when we are considering the FLASO. This is a system of marking a business studies essay. We'll look into the idea. Did the learner have introduction? Yes. The learner have a conclusion? Yes. And 02, did the learner provide all the subheadings? Yes. That is the first A. And then, did the learner have 16 marks and above? Looking into the facts, 32 marks? Yes. That is the second A. And then synthesis, when we're looking into the relevance of an essay, that is 02. And then looking into originality, this is to say now examples that are not from the textbook, we didn't see that, and then you get 38 out of 40 for the essay. So that is how you should go about with your essay. Then we are done. Let us look into summary of our lesson with main topics there for paper 1, business environment and business operations. Then we looked into the legislation, we looked into the main topic of the business environment, which is the business sectors and business strategy, and then the focus was on skills development, purpose of the skills development, the impact together with discriminatory action, ways to comply, penalties for non-compliance, rules of setters together with your funding of setters and the meaning of learnerships together with national skills development strategy and your human resource development strategy. Then we also looked into labor relations, focused on the purpose there, the impact together with discriminatory action, and ways to comply together with penalties for non-compliance. And we also looked into employers' rights and employees' rights. That was our lesson. We looked into typical section B questions, and thank you for watching.